Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition of Big Hairy News. Big HN for your Tuesday night. I believe it's a Tuesday. Is it a Tuesday, George? I think it's a Tuesday. It is a Tuesday. The days just roll into each other. I thought about it the other day. We are less than 2 weeks away from November. How fucking scary is that? Less than 2 weeks away from November. That basically means Christmas is just around the corner. And then we're into a whole brand new year. You doing well, sir?
Yeah, no, nothing really to report.
Nothing
Just,
untoward.
been staining a fence today.
Nice.
Got stain all over my hands. Which
Show us your hands.
There's sort of like no point in taking it off because it's just going to be there again tomorrow.
Is it hard to get stain? I mean, stain's supposed to stick onto wood or soak into wood. What is it like getting it off the old skin?
It sort of just falls off. Like washing it off isn't really a thing. It just sort of falls off.
And look, not to be, I don't want to be like insensitive or anything, but you can't get accused of having like black hands or something. That's not something that happens. You're not gonna be hauled up by someone for having coloring on your hands.
It does look like a little like henna sort of thing.
I love henna. I love watching it go on as well. Hey, thanks for joining us tonight. Looking forward to having a chat. There's a bunch of stuff we want to talk about tonight. One of the things we're going to talk about is the latest Sharma Drama, and what's happening with Gaurav Sharma at the minute. Also, we talked a bit last night about this evil and vindictive government that supposedly is going to keep all their rules about lockdown in place and keep us all under lock and key for the next 10 years. Well, that's apparently appears not be the case, funnily enough. And there was some news coming out today about the government relaxing all and getting rid of all the laws around lockdowns and restrictions for COVID, contrary to perhaps some people's opinions last night. So we'll have a look at that as well. A bunch of other stuff as well. There was an inflation announcement today, which was pretty piss poor compared to what they said was going to happen. And also apparently officially now Dunedin is the greatest place in New Zealand to live. There's been a survey, George. It's official. So we will look at that as well. But look, I'll tell you where we want to start. And remember, you can always contribute in the chat if you want to be involved with this. And hello to everyone who's joining us. G'day there, Ro. G'day, Paul. G'day, Simon. Good to see everybody again. You can always participate in the chat, share your thoughts, share your views as well. But we do want to start by talking about this Creative New Zealand funding situation with what appears to be a festival for teenagers for Shakespeare. We kind of touched on it last night when the Prime Minister was talking on RNZ, and we played some of that audio back, and the Prime Minister sounded a bit dismissive of it and a bit like, do I really need to talk about this? 24 hours later, it seems that it's become a little bit more high priority for the Prime Minister, and we'll play you some video later on where she's come out into a media scrum basically saying, we're going to find some funding for this festival. It's basically paraphrasing what she says. So we will have a look at that. But also, I wanted to understand a bit more what the hubbub was all about. And so, as we always do here on BHM, we want to get in people who are smarter than us and know more than us about these sorts of issues. So Derek Doddington has staged various adaptations of Shakespeare's plays, including open-air productions in Christchurch, Mona Vale, which attract crowds of more than 500 people a night. He was recently honoured by the Queen for his services to local drama. He has been quoted in the local, in recent time in the news about this decision made by Creative New Zealand, and who better to talk to about it than Derek Doddington himself. So welcome to the show, Derek.
Hello. Hi. How are you? Good.
Yeah, good, man. Hey, thanks for joining us. Really appreciate you giving us some time, especially because I was so slack on the uptake and contacted you so late this evening to just jump in and say g'day. There are angles to this, and what I want to do is cut through all the bullshit and just talk about what this actually means. So how about as someone who puts on Shakespeare's plays, talk to us about Creative New Zealand and funding and what this decision means for what looks to be, and correct me if I'm wrong, a festival for teenagers to be introduced to Shakespeare primarily.
Sure. Yeah, and not just Shakespeare, but drama in a whole. This is just one aspect of drama, you know. So yeah, they can learn anything, but this is something that all the schools around participate in, and the best of the bunch then from the Sheila Wynne then get the opportunity to go to London to actually act on the globe stage. So tremendous educational value, tremendous eye-opening for these, and of course progressive for them. And this is the problem. I think this is the worry of it, that if they're thinking of not funding this, it's going to have a slide down effect for people like myself who are putting on these plays, who basically need some real talent that have got some experience in this.
This has made worldwide news. And I think one of the reasons it's made worldwide news is that it appears that within this funding decision, language was used to make it seem like, you know, Shakespeare doesn't really fit in New Zealand anymore. I'm going to go to the Guardian newspaper from the UK and just read out what they said about it. This is a UK paper writing up about what's happened for this secondary school funded event in New Zealand. They say, quote, in the funding assessment document, the advisory panel said, while the festival had strong youth engagement and a positive impact on participants, it, quote, did not demonstrate the relevance to a contemporary art context of Aotearoa and in this time and place and landscape. The board signaled concerns that the organization was, quote, quite paternalistic, end quote, and that the genre was, quote, located within a canon of imperialism and missed the opportunity to create a living curriculum and show relevance. Now, the first thing I want to say is, other than the word salad and all the buzzwords that seem to have been used in there for not funding it, what does that actually mean? And how, as someone who puts on plays, do you respond to that decision from Creative New Zealand?
Well, I mean, you know, we can't just put on New Zealand plays. I mean, when you go to Netflix, when you go to Neon, when you go to Anywhere Television, right? If all we were doing was being served up New Zealand plays with Aotearoa, you know, there in our face, people wouldn't be watching so much. We need international stuff. We need variation. And to me, Shakespeare is not only educational, but it's fundamentally beautiful language, and it's our history, English history. So to be taking that away, yeah, to me, like I say, it's a travesty. That's what I'm worried about.
Derek, have you gone through this application process with Creative New Zealand before? Is it?
Sure, I have. Yeah, sure, I have. Several times.
Do you think those that comment there that was quoted in the Guardian, is that like an outside external assessor, like an academic they go to assess the funding application, and that's like one voice in a bunch of voices? Or do you think that and we're speculating a little bit here, that the decision was based around this idea that Shakespeare was sort of old hat, that it was also, you know, part of our colonial history, or whatever, it's English or whatever the case may be there?
Yeah, well, I mean, I can't say any more than I just disagree with it. You know, I mean, Shakespeare's on the NCA level curriculum. This is what kids are studying now, which I think is wonderful. I wouldn't just say they should only study Shakespeare. Surely they can study all American films. They can study anywhere from all European, you know, Asian films, whatever. But this happens to be just one genre, if you like. But to rule that out when it's actually still on the curriculums.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, colonialism. Yeah, I don't really know where all that's coming from.
Well, let me ask you this question as well, because when it comes to funding, I do wonder as well about the noise that's being made about this decision. Funnily enough, I read in The Guardian as well that this is only 10% of the budget for this festival. That means 90% of the budget comes from elsewhere anyway. What do you think about this reaction within some quarters that, because of colonization, the Bard's being cancelled when it's no one's cancelling it? They haven't funded it, but the funding was only going to be for 10% of the overall festival anyway, and that means the $30,000. That means there's $270,000 from elsewhere that is already there for this festival. That surely this is not 30,000 out of 300 is not the death knell, pardon the phrase, of Shakespeare amongst schools. You know what I'm saying? It seems like I guess, is this a storm in a teacup a little bit? That it's not necessarily the best decision in the world, but for someone to not get 10% of the funding, it's also not maybe the cancellation that everyone seems to think that it is.
I've no idea on the figures. I've no idea on your 10% or anything. I haven't read that. I haven't looked into that. I think it's just a thorn, really. I think, maybe what you're saying with this colonization, I think it's just a nail in a coffin, really, that should not have been contemplated. It's not going to stop, like a lot of things. I apply for funding for various things, and it makes life an awful lot easier and takes off a phenomenal amount of pressure, but you cannot rely on funding to do a project or something like this. So teachers, schools, this is important. It is definitely important, the Sheila wins, for the education and the well-being of the kids. They won't let this stop. But it's that kick in the teeth that I think is just, when so much good is coming out of something, that I struggle to find a reason not to support that.
Yeah. Let me just throw
elsewhere. Has it gone to something new, colonial or whatever? I've no idea. But when something's going good and it's doing a phenomenal amount of good, especially when the government's after things like youth, education, to me, with the commitment from all the schools and the teachers, this ticks all the boxes.
Look, I think that, I did Shakespeare at school and with the performances at school, and I couldn't agree with you more about the educational value there. Just so people know where that number is that I pulled out about 10%, because we want to make sure that people have the information. This is Dawn Sanders, who was the Centre's chief executive, being quoted. I won't read the whole thing out, but it's talking about the decision. And the last paragraph that I've got highlighted here says, the festival will continue without the funding, which represented roughly 10% of its overall costs, but the money will need to be found elsewhere, Sanders said. So that's coming from the director of the organization herself, that it was only 10%. Just so people know, so they've now got that. I also wanted to ask you, because they're talking about like the context and being relevant to New Zealand. I always think that Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet kind of broke new ground in the way that it, modernized. People who haven't seen it, in Romeo and Juliet, when they're doing archery in the original text, they're playing pool in his version of it. So the language lines up beautifully. When they're grabbing their swords, there's a zoom in, there's a close up of the name of the gun, the brand of the gun is sword. So he's saying, it's like saying, I'm grabbing Luger, he's grabbing his sword. So it works beautifully, and he brought it into a modern context whilst using the classic language. What about the idea of making Shakespeare more contemporarily accessible to New Zealanders in 2022 as well? Have Creative New Zealand missed out that aspect of this conversation?
So, well, this is where it affects me. So basically, I've done 17 years of open air summer Shakespeare at Mona Vale. And that was definitely coming to an end. And Isaac Theatre Royal and I have gone into a partnership now, which is the biggest theatre in Christchurch, seats 1,200 or so. So I've got a 3-year contract there, which we've already discussed will be extended. So we've done 2 years there now, 12th Night, and then we've just done Midsummer Night's Dream. And like you're talking about with the Romeo and Juliet, with the swords and the daggers. So I've just done Midsummer Night's Dream. There are 4 lovers in there. obviously two girls, two boys, and in the original text, the boy and the girl, the boy and the girl. So I cast one of the lovers from a girl to a boy. So we had two boys falling in love. And then with the other one, we introduced a transsexual. And basically, we do 6 performances in the Isaac Theatre Royal, and 2 of them are for school matinees. And we get 1,400 kids along in 2 performances to these school matinees. And we got phenomenal response from the schools and the kids. That the whole thing with the lovers, I mean, the play's not just about the lovers, but the whole concept that these kids, these 16, 17-year-old kids could come along and 2 men fell in love and then a female and a transsexual fell in love, brought the whole thing totally up to modern standards. The whole play worked. And I think it really struck a chord with a lot of these younger kids and some of them, we got a couple of emails from some of them that they are a bit lost in this modern world and society and everything with this gender business. And this play brought it home to them and said, hey, it's all right. This is a Shakespeare play. We've transformed the whole thing. So we've got men loving men and transsexual with a female. They loved it. I got emails galore that, by all means, if you wanted me, I could send you some on. I'd take the names out. So can it be brought up to date? Of course it can be brought up to date. This was totally modern. And we had a female, Emma Cusden, playing Puck. That's a traditionally, iconic male part.
Yeah.
Bottom was played by Nikki Blandau, which is a traditional, iconic male part. We completely transformed it and they loved it. So, and like I say, with all this whole decision, I need actors that have got experience and confidence in delivering these sort of lines. And yeah, this is, taking this away, which we know it won't. Sheila Wynne will carry on going, but trying to take this away or not funding it, it trickles down, and it trickles down to people like me.
All right, Derek. Hey, look, thank you for joining us tonight. We appreciate you you giving us some time.
No, absolutely. It's an important thing, and you're doing a great job.
Cool. And we will continue the conversation. I appreciate you for being here.
Fine. Thank you.
All right. Well, there's the first part of the conversation about this decision. I want to play comments that the Prime Minister said today as well, because as I said last night, she seemed a bit dismissive. That's my opinion on how she responded on RNZ, but she came to a media scrum today about this issue and almost unprompted, I think, offered this up. And I say almost unprompted because after she made this announcement, all the questions from the scrum aren't about what she's got to say. So obviously something happened in the last 24 hours that made this higher on her priority scale than it was.
Just before we kick off today, I know there's been a significant level of interest as to the future offering of Shakespeare in schools. I've been talking to our Minister of Education, and he has been talking with his ministry. The Ministry of Education intends to reach out to the Shakespeare Globe Centre to work with them to find a solution that ensures that the program will continue to be offered to schools. We expect to share a little more detail over that final resolution, but just to give that assurance, we're committed to continuing to see the program continue. The Ministry of Education is the most sensible place for that to be offered.
And then that went into questions about all sorts of other stuff. So there was no questions about this. There was something happened in the last situation. Hey, let me also say one thing as well. Sorry, George, I want to say one thing, because I think there's going to be some people who just saw that conversation we just had and be a little bit uncomfortable with some of the terms that Derek might have used. I'm not an expert in this area, but I understand for some people the word transsexual is now not a particularly accurate or fair word. Transgender is more appropriate in this day and age. So if anyone has taken offense to that, I would apologize. But what I would offer and ask is you maybe say you heard the context of what you're saying about, saving Shakespeare's performances as opposed to maybe some language from the geographical area where he maybe grew up from that he used, which others may not seem as so 2022. Anyway, moving on. George, sorry, you're going to say.
Yeah, Creative NZ have come out about this decision for the Ministry of Education to fund it, and basically said, yeah, okay, that makes sense. Maybe we should do this with other stuff because it's a secondary school thing. That's basically their rationale for flogging this off onto MOE is saying, maybe there's other things where this would where this would be a good idea as well. And clouding all this over, although not talked about, and there's a good article in Stuff written by James Wenley, a lecturer in theatre at Vic in Wellington, basically says Creative New Zealand doesn't have the funding to fund things, right? Basically, doesn't have enough funding. It relies on lottery grants funding as well. And basically he says that that's sort of a context that's missing from this conversation that, as you say, has gone international because of the whole cultural war cancelling stuff. But really, at the end of the day, it's a lack of funding in arts that is maybe perhaps another important narrative here.
I saw the numbers, and I think the numbers were Creative New Zealand got $16 million or $16.5 million for the financial year that we're in. Because I mean, the devil's always in the detail, yeah. Like I mean, I don't know why I'm thinking of Tor Fraser, but Tor Fraser #2, that fantastic play turned into a fantastic movie. If my kids at school had a chance to interact with something like Tor Fraser's #2 or 12th Night, if they had to pick, I probably would rather that they would go with a New Zealand play, a New Zealand playwright that actually is anchored in New Zealand, is anchored in our culture. But I guess I'm wondering where the line is and why the choice. If you've been funded $16.5 million, $30,000 is such a small portion of that they must have got down to decisions at the end of, we can't fund this $5,000 and this $8,000 and this $30,000, because it seems like such a small amount to take away from a festival that's been going on for, I believe, 30 years. So yeah, as always, the devil is in the detail. And I think, as Derek said, what else has been funded? What else has been put up against its place, and what is it replacing, or what is it being taken away from? I don't know.
Even big things like Auckland Fringe, NZ Fringe, Dunedin Fringe are unsuccessful in their applications at the moment with Creative NZ. So it's not just these small ones. And I get what you're saying, because if it is just 30 grand, then is this a decision wholly taken on what an academic said about it being the canon of imperialism, which I haven't really talked about it, but I think, I totally understand their point. I mean, it's an area I've spent many years in discussing, and but I wonder if, when it's a secondary school, that seem to, I guess. Well, Derek said this as well, and I agree with him. And there is that it's, and some people in the chat have said this as well, that it's like about people coming together to create stories that, even if the source material was Shakespeare, which, I mean, I'd even agree with Sean Plunkett and say transcends English culture, they bring themselves to it, right? And they bring their stories, whatever that might be, and that, it doesn't have to be, gender business or whatever. It can be a whole lot of other stuff. They bring it to that presentation, or however you say it in theatre, that production of Shakespeare. So yeah,
that was an interesting conversation as well with Derek, talking about when we talked about contextualizing it into New Zealand in 2022, and he talked about basically LGBT issues. I mean, not discounting that brings it into a modern context, but that doesn't necessarily bring it into a New Zealand context, the examples that he gave. Excuse me.
That's a good point, especially when the decision would have been its wording is that it's not relevant to New Zealand, etc., etc. I really want to get my hands on the assessment document because we've heard from whoever said canon of imperialism. That's the headline that's gone around the world. Creative NZ can't disclose who their consultant is,
Or won't, can't or won't.
The CEO says that they don't, and you can't Freedom of Information Act who they are and that sort of thing.
We talked a bit about, I talked a bit about the Prime Minister last night and the language that sometimes the Prime Minister uses. I don't think it's helpful for the overarching message. And I think this could be also one of those situations. I mean, to be honest, when I talked about word salad earlier, the locked in with a canon of imperialism, it's like, for fuck's sake, you can explain things in a better way. Like I said, if a school said to me, we can do one stage show this year, right? We can do one stage show. We've got one performance. These are the ones we're going to pick from. I'm not saying I would discount Shakespeare, but from having been on stage a lot, I probably would lean towards myself as a parent, as someone who's been a performer and been on stage, something that did reflect more my kids and my country and my community today than something else. I would probably lean that way. Explaining something like that is very different from then going off about fucking locked in with a canon of imperialism. It's like,
it's very, it would be an academic definitely writing that. And I mean, that wording wasn't, that's not necessarily written for public consumption. It's sort of their assessment to Creative New Zealand about the application. But I totally get what you're saying. It doesn't help the situation at all.
No.
In fact, it doesn't help their critique at all, really, because I mean they do have a point. It's just obviously not communicated that well.
I mean, there is a very strong drive, and I support the drive of New Zealanders telling New Zealand stories. That doesn't mean we discount other stories, but I mean the whole New Zealand on Air funding model is about New Zealanders telling New Zealand stories and stuff. And in a school setting, I like I said, I'm not saying get rid of Shakespeare, but I'm like, I understand the idea of wanting to do something more culturally aware, societally aware for that group of kids in that moment as well. I would hope that would be not an like as an either or. It would be an and. You can do both. But
which is what the CEO of Creative NZ has been saying in interviews and that sort of thing. Is like we still fund things that could be seen as of a European extraction or a British extraction, that sort of thing. But I don't know. It's one of those things that it would have just been such a little thing for some assessor of the application, but it's like a 30 years long project for the secondary school and stuff. It means a hell of a lot to the teachers community and the students, and to them it would have been maybe such a simple academic exercise to be like, well, actually no, this is this is just more of the same. It's more of that British colonial cultural influence, and maybe we should put the money somewhere else. When in reality, the project, the production, would have meant so much to a bunch of people.
I also think it's important to recognize, I mean, anytime I did a production when I was in high school, there was no funding. It's like the schools can put on any performance they want. This is about a festival that brings the schools together. Like that's where the funding goes. Like when what did we do? We did Shakespeare, we did Hair, we did Godspell, we did a bunch of different plays in the kind of 4 or 5 years that I was at secondary school, and there was no funding for those. There was no Creative New Zealand funding those. They were just done. So this shouldn't impact the schools doing Shakespeare. It might affect a festival being held, although as we've just said, 90% of the funding comes from elsewhere anyway. So I feel like it's a bit of a storm in a teacup. I really do.
Yeah. Because of that headline, cancelling Shakespeare or whatever it might be. That's exactly why we're talking, which is why I bring up the funding thing, because that's often the thing that is glossed over or made to disappear, those material issues, when we're talking about the cultural war bullshit, right? That's often the thing that is eluded.
Yeah, look, I think that I think Shakespeare will be alive and well in schools around New Zealand, whether it's alive and well in a festival or not. I don't know. I'm fully in support of the festival. I've been to many of those performances. I've never performed in that, but it's not such a big deal. I do think the one of the things to learn from this, and for fuck's sake, it doesn't seem that bureaucracies or government institutions or academics are really getting to the terms with this, is that how they write things up needs to be worked on a little bit. And I'm not stupid enough to go, I don't understand. I do understand, but when it gets disseminated to the public, you have to understand who is then receiving that. So actually there's a skill in communicating your message to someone, or a skill in communicating what it is. Now, it might be Creative New Zealand's fault. As you said, George, that might be more of an internal message. And if they've just slapped it on their report and sent it out there, then fucking Creative New Zealand needs to have their heads read and needs to be able to be explained in a different way that is actually not going to set off these alarm bells for people when there's really nothing here. It is a storm in a teacup. So I don't know. It's just I'm frustrated the number of times you get ideas, and this is just an idea. I'm not even calling this a good idea, but good ideas or perfectly okay thoughts worded in a way that causes disruption because it could have been said or communicated better. And it just seems that skill of passing on information, disseminating information to the public, is kind of gone, or certainly going. And yeah, people need to pull their socks up about it. Or you can just keep coming here and we'll just disseminate it for you, and then you'll have all the answers you need. Hey, George.
Something like that, yeah.
Hey, let's follow up on our story from last night. I think it's important. Oh, actually, were there any messages? Because people are actually talking about this in the tweet. Should we is there anything there that you've seen that needs to go up there?
Oh no, is it rude to say Shakespeare was made in a time of rampant imperialism for the benefit of monarch patrons? I'll get the tiny violin. Art is meant to be critical. Let's be critical about art. That's sort of reflective of some of the sentiment we've had, pretty much.
My apologies again for having to bail for a little cough there. The flu from last week is still a little bit here, but we're doing all right. Yeah, so thank you for there is the chat's pretty busy tonight, and we can see that, so we thank you for that. But we will leave it at that for now and move on. Because one of the things I like about the chat is you guys talk to each other as well, and that's kind of cool. So last night we had a story from NewsHub. NewsHub said that they were sort of breaking news. They had an exclusive that the government was going to try and keep power and not release the rules around the COVID restrictions and And we said, the thing about this is it's a working document. I don't think I used that phrase last night, but it seems to be a working document. And when you come together as a company or an organization or a caucus, the working document is, what are we going to do? Let's get all the ideas down there. And what's come out today is what they're actually going to do. And it doesn't reflect very accurately what NewsHub was saying last night, because it seems that really the government is going to relax, release, and absolutely get rid of pretty much all the rules at the time they said they were, which I think is May of next year, I think, and keep very few arrows in that quiver should they need to reinforce anything should COVID take off again. So basically, this is a big FU to last night's NewsHub story when the government has said today what they're actually going to do. Have a listen. One News.
Well, the government has just announced changes to its response to COVID-19. To tell us more, let's bring in Wilson Longhurst. Wilson, what's happening?
Hi, Wilson.
Kia ora, Jenny. Yes, well, this has just been announced by the government via a press release from the acting COVID-19 response minister, Chris Hipkins. Essentially, what the government is announcing is a scaling back of its legal powers when it comes to COVID-19 and the rules that affect all of us in New Zealand, some of which have been in place since early 2020, of course, when the initial emergency broke out. It's announced a scaling back of the COVID-19 Public Health Response Act, meaning it's winding down the use of lockdowns, mandates and MIQ. Those are all off the cards. But what will remain...
I think fair to be say at the moment that at least two of those things, if not three of those things, are already off the cards, because there's no MIQ happening right now. There's no real mandates happening right now, and there's no lockdowns happening right now. So this is sort of a cleaning up of the legislation and going, those are still on the books if we needed them, but we're going to get rid of them. But at the moment in practice, they're not happening anyway. Just, I know we all know that, but some people have been talking about, when the government get rid of these mandates, and you go, what mandates? And they go, all the mandates. And I'm like, well, I think there's still mandates for some medical people, and I think of the armed services, and that's about it. But this is going to get rid of it all.
Tools in the toolkit are mask wearing and isolation periods, and they will only be introduced. The mask wearing, of course, we don't have to do that at the moment, if and when necessary, as we move through the outbreak going forward. Anything beyond that, though, the likes of a lockdown would now require a law change if the government did want to put that in place.
So, Wilson, what does this all mean in terms of where we're heading with COVID-19?
Well, Jenny, cases have slowly been rising over the past month or so. They were at about just under 10,000 at the start of the month, whereas yesterday there were more than 14,000 cases in the week leading up to Monday. We spoke to the...
That's quite an important thing to actually hear. That's a 50% increase. Because whilst it means the numbers are still quite small, a couple of thousand a day, compared to, David Welsh talking about 5,000 a day. But if you think about it from the other side, it's increased by 50% in 3 weeks. That's something to keep an eye on, especially with some experts saying with BQ 1.1, there probably will be another surge before Christmas. So, watch this space.
The Associate Professor at Auckland University of Microbiology, Susie Wiles, and she said that 3 things are contributing to the slow uptick in cases.
We've lost the traffic light system, so we have, less people wearing masks, which is one of the really good things that helps, prevent transmission. We've got lots of people who have, it's, several months since they've had an infection or since they've had their booster, and some people haven't had a booster yet. So that means our immune response is waning. So that's something that's also kind of coming up. And then we've got these new, more immune evasive variants. So all these things are playing out together.
Of course, that came with the announcement last week of the new variant arriving in New Zealand that has caused a cases uptick abroad. But the government has said today that it'll be looking at its COVID-19 measures once again at the end of next month.
There you go, George. So basically everything except isolation, which is, I think, pretty sensible anyway, basically saying if you get COVID, isolate for 7 days. But remember, they've already changed the household contacts. Household contacts don't have to isolate anymore. They have to basically keep testing. And if you do isolate, if you do get it, then you have to isolate. And the mask mandate's wrong word, the mask advice, which currently is pretty much off the table anyway, but they're keeping that on the book should they have to. So like we said last night, George, should there be something that goes on that required a lockdown, I think the chances of having a lockdown, no matter what happened before, the election next year, is about 1 in a trillion, because that would be the final nail in the Labour Party coffin if that did happen. But if it did, they'd have to pass new legislation to actually make that happen. So it's masks, and it's isolating at home if you get sick. And really the only one that we're doing at the moment is isolating at home. So that's all that they're really keeping on the books. So yeah, I wonder, what are your thoughts around, George, the report that Newshub put out last night that we talked about, was very much focusing on the what could happen rather than what's likely to happen.
Would be. When I saw the 6 p.m. news today, I was like, "Fuck, that would be the perfect for like a journalism 101 or a critical media studies 101 course to show that report from last night, and then to show the report from today about and how that language so easily can present a report which is something we often hear and leads to stories, isn't it? A report has said, etc., 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 and how that can so easily be spun, not for any like not for even really any ideological reason ideological in terms of national or party politics or anything like that, but just because that's how the medium works. That's what you do as a news organization, is turn this nothing working document report into a exclusive breaking news piece. And it was just such a perfect 24 hours example of how that works. And eventually, we hear what's actually going on in terms of the government's plans. But that initial enthusiasm and spectacle of the red breaking news, that initial moment is not reconciled in any way. Any way, the damage or whatever of that is already done.
And I think that, as Freestyle said, clickbait. There you go, clickbait. I mean, are you more likely to have a headline? Are you more likely to click on a story that says 60% of people hate Jacinda, or you're more likely to say the Prime Minister has a 40% approval rating? Now, which one's gonna? It's the same. It's sort of the same data, but it depends how it then gets spun by the journalist or the editor to then write the headline and see what comes out as well. So, yeah, perhaps they went through the report and they said what could be kept if the government chose to. So that's what they highlighted, and then that's not what they did. Now, unfortunately, I think, and we talked about last night, optics being so important, is you may well find in the next couple of days, National and perhaps ACT coming out talking about, good to see that the government caved when the pressure was put on and they cancelled these things. They weren't going to, so I guess we'll have to probably deal with that and see how that pans out. I mean, my gut tells me, well, the feeling is this was always going to be the announcement. You don't get that much of a change, that much of a turnaround in the space of 12 hours, but in general. So I think it's fair to say that News Hub got it wrong.
Yeah, I think the Shakespeare thing, on the other hand, which wasn't a turnaround. Cindy isn't sitting at the top of both Creative NZ and the Ministry of Education and the Beehive making all these decisions as much as some people think she is. That wasn't a turnaround, but I do think was definitely influenced by the nature of that Shakespeare story in terms of its its international sort of flavor, for such a, and it was because it jived with a sort of cultural war, attack on white culture, European culture, in the Facebook comments, sort of thing, and that in turn turned into real political pressure and real Ministry of Education funding.
Yeah, you tell me if you think I'm wrong. And look, I'm more than happy to be told I'm wrong, but she did sound quite dismissive to me about it on that RNZ item yesterday. And she did have a very different vibe about it today. So something's happened. Someone's caught wind of the, especially because she was involved in it, yada, yada, yada. She did it as a student. Yeah, I guess also today, and we'll get onto the Sharma story shortly. There's more bad headlines for Labor. And in this instance, they've kind of haven't done anything. In fact, they've kind of done things right, because we all know the Sharma situation was, he did some pretty, I say allegedly, just to protect us legally, allegedly nasty or bad or naughty things. And the Labor Party said, if you do that again, you're gone. He did them again, or did other things again, and so he was gone. And then they didn't force a by-election because they didn't want to cost the country money, and they didn't need to have that seat because they had a majority. And then now, so I don't know. I'm not suggesting that, I'm not being quite as cynical as going, because they've got other headlines that aren't going to be as good, that she probably wanted to get out there and do something that was more positive. But what I'm saying is, this is going to be this Sharma situation is going to come back and bite Labor in the ass, even though for this they don't really seem to have had a lot. They haven't done a lot wrong here from the looks of things, but it's not going to be, again, optically a good look for them to have now a former renegade MP coming out and constantly going on and on and on and on and on about the Prime Minister lying, because everyone else will pick up on that, because now National and ACT and anyone else who wants to will be able to get in there and say, well, look, here's someone that was on the inside who's now speaking the truth. That's be the line they take. So yeah, I you know what, I don't want to be a pessimist this far out, but I think it's going to be an uphill struggle to see a Labour Green government in 12 months.
Oh,
I'd have to say if there was a bookie in New Zealand at the moment, I'd say odds are on National ACT government as it stands today. We'll see what happens. It's a long way to the election, but yeah, she's a hard road for the lefties to get there. I would say. All right. Shall we have a look at the Sharma drama?
Yeah. I'm clueless what's going on.
Well, as were many of his colleagues. So let's just play the gorgeous Simon Dello and his breaking story about what happened with Gaurav Sharma today.
Controversial Labour MP Gaurav Sharma has thrown in the towel and quit as a Member of Parliament, forcing a by-election in his Hamilton West electorate. He claims Labour was plotting to boot him out of Parliament before next year's election, so he jumped first. But the Prime Minister says she's got no idea what he's on about. Here's senior political reporter Benedict Collins.
Torching what was left of his political career in the hopes of rising again.
It has become clear in the last few days that I will need to resign. It has become even more clear that, I will need to start my own party.
The outgoing MP convinced Labour, which had already expelled him from caucus, was preparing to use the waka jumping rules to force him out of Parliament too.
They have said that the party's next step is to remove me as a Member of Parliament, but they want to do it at a time when it is 6 months or less from the general election, which means there will not be a by-election.
But both the Prime Minister and her deputy say that's not true.
No, I'm not aware of any discussion about that whatsoever.
Kind of feels like you might have made a mistake about being waka jumped here.
No. Why would you say that?
Why do none of the ministers or the Prime Minister know anything about it?
Well, because they're not going to come out and tell you that now if they wanted to remove me in February or March.
Insisting everyone else is wrong.
The Prime Minister has been lying for the last 2 months. Well, they've been lying about a lot of things.
What do his former Labour colleagues make of it?
Gaurav Sharma, he's thrown in the towel, he's resigned.
I hadn't caught up with that, sorry.
I think some parts of this episode have been a bit of a sideshow and I haven't paid too much attention to them.
The show's not over yet. Now taxpayers have to fork out for a by-election, a year out from a general election. And guess who's contesting it?
I will be running in the by-election, yes.
So how do those in the Hamilton West electorate feel about it?
I think we'll probably get a very clear indication of where Labour lie at the moment in terms of the general public.
No, you won't.
Certainly puts the Labour Party probably in a position they prefer not to be in a year out from a general election.
Waste of money, not needed.
It's taxpayer money, so I pay taxes, so I've got to pay for it.
But National's licking its lips.
Well, we're in it to win it. We welcome the chance to have a by-election in Hamilton West.
And Labour left to contest a by-election battle it didn't want to fight.
And Benedict's with us now live from Parliament. How much of a headache is this by-election for the Labour Party, Benedict?
Well, I'll put it this way, Simon. I think the government will be reaching for the political Panadol this evening. The Prime Minister issued a statement this afternoon urging Dr. Sharma to reconsider his decision to quit. She said it was unnecessary. She promised that she wouldn't waka jump him from Parliament, and she said he could save the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars. But what the Prime Minister will be really worried about is that Labour is about to get a bloody nose in this by-election. The Hamilton West seat has a history of changing hands, and with National riding high in the polls, there's every chance that National could win this seat back off Labour. Dr. Sharma today, he played his trump card, and in doing so, he's gone from being a minor irritant for the government to being a serious problem.
Right. There you go, George. You didn't know too much about that. Tell me your thoughts first before I rip into it.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's a shame that it's going to... Because I pay taxes. I'm special, like that guy was. I love that. I love that I pay my tax things. Like, yeah, we all fucking do, mate. But I am serious when I say, yeah, it's a waste of fucking money.
Of course.
Yeah. I don't think there's much else I really thought about that.
Here's the first thing. First of all, I call bullshit. I mean, I think we all do, don't we? Do we all call bullshit on Sharma's claims? For a couple of reasons. The second thing is he's saying that the Labour Party is going to remove him as an MP. How would they do that? He's already been ejected from Labor, hasn't he? He's an independent. The Labor Party can't just go to all the independents, oh, by the way, you're out. You know, when Peter Dunn used to be in, there's one, by the way, you're out. You're no longer an MP. I don't even understand how he can make that claim that I wrote it down. They were going to, quote, remove me as a member of parliament. How can a political party remove an independent as a member of parliament? What is there in there that can even make that happen? I don't believe that's something that can happen. So I call bullshit on that.
Except for the Walker jumping.
But he's an independent.
Yeah.
He's not part of Labor. Labor can't.
The only way would be.
But Labor can't go in and go, yeah, you're out, independent person who now has nothing to do with us. By the way, we're going to decide. Yeah. So it's horseshit. I don't believe that to be the case. But even if it was the case, and Simon's just offering some thoughts around here. Remember, he's an independent though. He's not part of Labor. The Walker jumping build as give parties. Anyway, the power to remove dissidents if they ask to speak it to do it. Currently, Labor have not used it because they do not want to buy election. I think you need to work on your thumbs there on your phone, Simon, to get us through that. But yeah, okay. Look. I mean, fact check me, George. Have a look at. Just Google this one question: is Gaurav Sharma still a Labor Party MP? Because that would be the only way that they could do it. But I understand they're talking about him as an independent.
Yeah, because it would be, but with Walker jumping, it would be hard because then there would be a sort of loophole, right? You could just say, I'm not a member of that party anymore, and suddenly be a National Party member, MP. You get what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
but anyway, I still call bullshit in my honest hell belief, because this does nothing for Labor, and getting rid of him 6 months out from the election will do nothing for Labor as well. They're already going to struggle enough to get back in, if that's even possible. So I don't see it at all. The other thing is, we'll see what happens, but I suspect Labor will get back in, and they'll get back in for one main reason, and that's because Gaurav Sharma is going to run against them. So Gaurav Sharma will split the vote of people who don't want to vote for Labor. So he'll probably help them get back in, because he'll take a percentage of the vote, National will take a percentage of the vote, and then Labor will probably get the most in that by-election. So I think that's my prediction. My prediction could be wrong. We shall find out. But I suspect,
ladies and gentlemen,
I suspect my best bet is National and Gaurav will split the right vote, and Labor will go through and hold on to that seat. However, as we've just been talking about, although it's not quite as simple as I'm about to state it, there seems or appears to be a shift to the right in local body elections. If National was to win this seat, that would be pretty good fuel on the fire 12 months out from an election for them to be able to go, see, New Zealand wants a change. I mean, Christopher Luxon's been saying this for 6 months now. New Zealand wants a change. New Zealand wants a change. If National doesn't win this seat, that will speak against what Christopher Luxon's narrative has been. If they do win the seat, it will add strength to his claim that New Zealand wants a change. So it's actually probably, from a political commentary point of view, it's going to be quite interesting. Actually, I'm quite interested to see what happens. But I'll stand by my prediction. You heard it here first, that I think Labor will win it, and I think they'll win it because unless Gaurav Sharma runs for National, if he runs as his own party or as an independent, and so does National, they'll split the right vote, and Labor will get in. I think
42 people will vote for him.
Maybe, but you'll probably get all those people, all the disenfranchised, all the anti-vaxxers, all the alt-rights, all these people who would have put their votes, who would have put their votes behind National if they wanted to get rid of Labor, and now they'll see him as a martyr to the cause.
His seat doesn't include Raglan, though, does it? So yeah,
it's west, isn't it? So it's on that side. No, I don't know. Don't know if it goes as far as Raglan, but we'll see.
So yeah, Walker jumping, they could use that.
How? Can you explain it, or do we need to do more research to understand it?
In 2018, a bit was added, which requires a defecting MP, this is from Wikipedia, to give up their seat on the request of their former party leader. which seems like immense power against I guess that's why it was controversial when it came in. We'll have more of a look into that. As for the tides, electoral tides, I mean, it would just be a huge sort of historical. I mean, elections aren't really, they're sort of faux historical events, but it would be massive if Labour won next year. I really, really doubt it that they will, but it would be, it would sort of upset the pattern. It would upset the feeling in the country, and I think there is a sort of post-COVID sort of fatigue that people, for good reason or not, sort of place onto Jacinda. Jacinda becomes the embodiment of that, trauma, to be a therapist for a second there.
Yeah, and look, just on that, let me just bring up Melvin's comment. Melvin says, I don't think any anti-vax is going to vote for national Love Out Loud. Is that what that stands for? Love Out Loud? I'm kidding. I think the point that Melvin doesn't get, or maybe he does, and he's taking the piss of it, is that what you've just said, anything to vote against Jacinda. And I think that you'll find that there is we have to get rid of Labour, and there will be a sector of those group of people who are at the Wellington protests, who are, anti-vaxxers, all that kind of stuff, who will vote strategically for National to help get Labour out. Then there'll be another big chunk of them who think for some reason the Destiny Party is going to get in, or who vote for the Freedom and Outdoors Coalition, whatever they're called as well. But absolutely, some anti-vaxxers will vote for them. But and with the upcoming by-election, what will happen on some level is that because Gaurav Sharma is now bluntly and blatantly, being aggressive towards Jacinda Ardern, calling her a liar, and that he's going to get an influx of people who just want to see the worst for the Prime Minister. Now, George, that might be 42 people out of 50. I don't know. But he will get that support. Whereas that support would have gone to National in that by-election should he not run. So anyway, we'll see. I could be wrong. Should we put a dollar on it, George?
Well, here we go. Sweepstakes on by-election night. They should move it. They should really move that 6 months thing to a year for by-elections in an election year, or election 6 months.
Part of the difficulties as well is I know the Prime Minister's already signalled that she will make the announcement when the election day is at the start of next year, but they don't have to. I mean, she could also make it a shorter time frame. She could, at the start of next year, announce that it's going to be in 2 months. So that saying it's got to be 6 months before the election, how can you do that if you don't know when the election date is going to be? So it's a bizarre thing. Maybe they should just do it the year of the election. Like, so that from the 1st of January of election year, you should have it there, because then whenever the election happens, whether it's the middle of the year, end of the year, or whatever, there's this conspiracy theory going around at the moment that Labour's going to call a snap election to try and still use some of their COVID powers to stop the votes going through. People don't tend to understand that, historically speaking, all around the Western world, the smaller the voter turnout, the better it is for the right. So that would actually be something that would actually suit National and ACT, should that be the case.
One last thing, Politikiwi did the research for us.
Yep.
Basically, spelling out what I was saying before.
So let me just read that before you take it down. The Electoral Integrity Amendment Act 2018 amends the Electoral Act 1993, allowing expulsion of MPs who choose to leave their party or who are expelled from their party, making their seats vacant.
It's pretty full on power.
It is pretty full on. And yes, that is so that can happen, but I don't believe it would. I mean, I don't think there's any. I mean, it was great. The article and the journalist said to Dr. Sharma, "Where's your evidence?" And his response was, "I've been talking to people." So where's the evidence? He fucking spent. And did you hear that? I don't know. Maybe it was on the TV3 item that I watched. And then the second comment or question after that was, "Did you record those conversations?" And he said no. because he has a habit of recording people he's speaking to privately, which is one of the reasons he got he got dumped out of Labour. All right, let us finish up with one thing. Here you go, George. This is for you and me. Otago Daily Times, great place to live. Dunedin tops city survey. Dunedin has topped resident rankings as a great place to live, achieving higher satisfaction rates than 8 other urban centres in New Zealand, a survey has found. The latest survey carried out earlier this year and released today shows 85% of Dunedin residents think the city is a great place to live. Next highest were Christchurch, Greater Wellington and Tauranga, all on 81%. The survey also found nearly 9 out of 10 Dunedin residents rate their quality of life positively. It was officially 87%, while 6 out of 10 residents said they enjoyed a good work-life balance, which was 61%. I thought when I read this, George, what it means is either Dunedin residents have a great place to live or have very low standards. It could be that they've just got very low standards, but I saw this pop up today and I thought, as we are Dunedin through and through, that we better throw this out there as a bit of a slap in the face.
Does the article have results from elsewhere?
It does. If I go further down, every 2 years, Auckland, Hamilton, Tauranga, Hutt, Porirua, Wellington City, Greater Wellington Region, Christchurch and Dunedin. Sample sizing, of course, the new mayor got in saying it means we're great, because that's what he was doing. Tauranga had the highest overall rating for quality of life, 90%, followed by Wellington City, 89%, Hutt and Greater Wellington, both 88%, and Dunedin, 87%. For example, that's just other stuff.
Do you know where the best place up north when I was on my road trip that I went to was Napier. Napier was
beautiful,
amazing. And it was weird, the amount of sort of small commerce, just like and the liveliness of the streets. Even it was like a Wednesday or Tuesday night. Wednesday night, I think it was. Quite late, but there were like people. There was like places open and like kids and families. Like it was like 9 p.m. There were skateboarders. It was like, and it was warm. And yeah, I mean, it was amazing. Like small commerce, like a toy store, like not like a branch of a bigger chain or anything, like a local sort of toy store, shit like that. It was like it was amazing, like another planet.
And a beautiful architecture, all the Art Deco, thanks to the earthquake that went through in the 1920s, 1930s. Free soul, you can tell us. And so beautiful rebuilt city and looks fantastic.
There's an amazing story on a sort of information board near the sea about a German submarine that went there during the war and was just hanging out watching Napier at night. And they tried to down a freighter that was leaving and missed, and then they buggered off. But yeah, I didn't even know about that. That was like the closest we came. Although there are always stories about like the Japanese coming aboard onto Otago Peninsula and stealing cows and shit like that. But that was never really backed up. But this
World War II
backed up with journals from yes, yeah.
There's that play. I remember doing it at school. I think it's called Shuriken. Shuriken play. And it's about, there was actually a Japanese prisoner of war camp in New Zealand. That's it there, because I recognized the cover.
I think Free Soul is saying 25 degrees.
Yes. 25. It's very warm here today as well, though. Like, let's not beat around the bush.
Oh no, but it had that like warm nighttime sort of thing going on. I mean, we'll get there in Dunedin now that it's summer.
Sorry, I'm just looking at this play because I can't remember too much about it. You're just talking about the Japanese being on here. This is I remember doing it at school. Shuriken. This one here, Vincent O'Sullivan. There's a good, I think the Japanese military field code was exposed. The Japanese forces do not surrender to the enemy under any circumstance. How then would the 800 or so prisoners who found themselves in the first Japanese prisoner of war camp anywhere in the world behave? They'd been brought from the Solomon Islands to Featherston in 1942. So there you go. 6 months later, an incident occurred in which 49 prisoners and 1 New Zealand guard were killed. Vincent O'Sullivan explores the implications of this event in a play which immediately rises above mere documentation to consider what happens when people of two cultures are brought together in such extreme circumstances, and when even the best intentions of those who try to offer sympathy and understanding fail in the face of ignorance and prejudice. So did you know that there was a Japanese prisoner of war camp in New Zealand in World War II? Yeah,
Wow.
Shuriken.
Yes.
Shuriken by Vincent O'Sullivan. Yeah, I remember doing it at school. Oh, it's published here. Oh, no, it's not. It's Waka University. I thought it said Otago for a second. There you go. A little bit of information. I was just thinking, as well as you're saying, I mean, if you were a German soldier or a Japanese soldier, what would be better than to be cruising around, like during World War II, to be cruising around the coast of New Zealand? How safe would that feel compared to being in the Northern Atlantic Ocean or something like that?
The information panel had like notes from their journals, from the German sailors' journals, and they were like, they look so comfortable. They've got all the lights on and they're dancing away on the seaside sort of cafes and stuff. Like there's not a war going on,
Yeah. All right. Hey, thanks for joining us today, George. If people are just asking about that play now. Yeah, if you want to have a look, Vincent O'Sullivan. Although you have to remember the things that, I mean, brings us full circle to talk about Shakespeare, I guess, actually. The things about plays is they're not books to be read. They're pieces of art to be performed. So I remember performing this when I was at school and studying it as well. But I don't know. Actually, I wonder if this should have been turned into something. I wonder if it has. Anyway, I might do some more research about that. But if people want to find out more about it, there it is. Yeah, Shuriken, a play by Vincent O'Sullivan. I wonder, maybe we should get a hold of him. Originally published in 1984. Shuriken. All right, team. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We appreciate it. Thank you very much to Derek Doddington for joining us to talk about the Creative New Zealand decision, and as a playwright and a director, his thoughts around that. Thank you for all the comments in the comment thing, whatever. And I guess we look forward to catching you tomorrow night from 10 p.m. for another edition of Big Hairy News. Until then, hooroo, my friends. Thank you, George. Thank you, team. Thank you, ball boys. Thank you, umpires. See you later.